Lowe's knows Sundays are for football, so tackle your home improvement projects by Saturday and earn your Sunday with great deals on LG and Bosch appliances, select Bounty and Swiffer cleaning products, and more. Then once your to-do list is done, get ready to kick back, relax, and enjoy the game. Shop in-store or online now and earn your Sunday with help from Lowe's, official partner of the NFL.
Get almost anything you need delivered with Uber Eats. What do we mean by almost? Well, you can't get a well-groomed lawn delivered, but you can get a chicken parm delivered. A little escape? No. A delicious bowl of grapes? Yes, that. An afternoon stroll? Sorry, no. A burrito bowl? Happily, yes. A day of sunshine? No. A box of fine wines? Yes. Uber Eats can definitely get you that. Get almost anything delivered with Uber Eats. Order now. Alcohol in select markets. Product availability may vary by region. See app for details. Get almost anything delivered with Uber Eats. Order now.
This is the Late Round Podcast with your host, JJ Zacharisa.
What's up, everyone? It's JJ Zacharisa, and in this episode 1054 of the Late Round Fantasy Football Podcast, a classic mailbag pause. Thanks for tuning in. Before I get to the mailbag questions this week, I've got a favor to ask you. If you check out the description for this episode, you'll see there's a link to a survey. That survey shouldn't take that long to fill out, but it's really helpful for myself and David Kitchen, my COO, to get honest feedback from you guys. Like I said earlier this week, I want Late Round Fantasy Football, this podcast, the content that I'm doing, I want those things to be as helpful and entertaining as they possibly can be. And the best way to do that is through listening to what's working for you guys and what's not. So if you could fill it out, I would greatly appreciate it. Now let's get to these mailbag questions. The first question is an email. It says, "Hey JJ, love the podcast. Got a couple of hits from you this year. Awesome. Can you explain your adjusted fantasy points allowed stat? I don't understand it, but you bring it up every week when talking about matchups. Thanks, Isaac." Yeah, I think this is a good thing to bring up because people come and go with this show and don't automatically know exactly what I'm talking about. I adjust a lot of different metrics. Target share, points allowed, rushing yards allowed, the list goes on. All the adjusting is adjusting for strength of opponent, for strength of schedule. So let's just take the Cowboys against wide receivers this year. They've allowed over 360 PPR points to wide receivers in 9 games played. But technically, according to my numbers, the Steelers have actually allowed more points to wide receivers, like 1 more point. So we might conclude, based on the fact that both teams have had their bye, so on a points per game basis, the Steelers are technically allowing more points to wide receivers than the Cowboys are. We might conclude that the Steelers are a better matchup for wide receivers in terms of fantasy points allowed, because they've technically allowed 1 more PPR point across the season to the position. At the very least, they're really comparable. But what I do is look at who they've actually faced and how many fantasy points those teams generally score as a wide receiver room. So Pittsburgh, when you look at that, they're still bad against wide receivers. But wide receiver rooms generally are scoring 7.6 PPR points per game above their average when they face Pittsburgh. Wide receiver rooms, when they face Dallas, they're scoring 11.6 PPR points per game above that season-long average. That's a pretty significant difference. So I do that for a lot of metrics to kind of give us a better sense of who's actually been good and who's actually been bad in fantasy points allowed, or some other metric, right? Like target share. A lot of times there's going to be overlap. Like the raw numbers are going to look a whole lot like the adjusted numbers. But this gives you a true raw number when thinking about how well a team might perform above or below expectation based on how things have gone during a season. And for the record, all these numbers, they're on the Late Round Fantasy Football Patreon. This next question's from that Patreon. It's from Ballgame4. It says, "Hi JJ, what are your thoughts on Jayden Reed's role when he returns? In an offense lacking a yards after the catch option in Tucker Kraft's absence, I'm curious if you believe there's a chance for an increased role despite the wide receiver snap carousel we typically see from Green Bay. The schedule looks strong down the stretch. Thanks for all your thoughtful analysis." Look, I love Jayden Reed. I've been a truther since he came out of college. I think he's an awesome player. But the Packers deploy their wide receivers and deploy Jayden Reed in particular in a really specific way, which is via the slot. and that leads to fewer routes run than the other wide receivers. Just to give you some data with that, over the offseason, I did some research on this type of player, and Josh Downs is included in this mix too. They're wide receivers who look the part, who have great metrics to back it up, but their teams refuse to give them bigger roles. They're slot guys. I wrote a newsletter back in early August that was titled, "Does Jayden Reed's slot-only role matter?" And what I found was that it's pretty rare for players with lower route participation rates, like under 80%, and then high slot rates above 60%, to give us significant production in fantasy football. In fact, we've only had 5 instances since 2011 where a wide receiver was within those parameters who then finished as a wide receiver 2 or better in fantasy football in points per game. And when you look at those successes, Victor Cruz in 2011, Keenan Allen in 2022, Percy Harvin in 2011, Randall Cobb in 2012, and Hunter Renfrow in 2021, 4 of those players scored at least 8 touchdowns. The only one who didn't was Keenan Allen, but he only played 10 games and he scored 4 times in those 10 games. Their median target share was also 23%. That's been really hard to achieve in this current Packers offense, at least across a large stretch of games. So I guess what I'm getting at here is that, yes, hypothetically, Tucker Kraft being out, the wide receiver room looking like it does, yes, Jayden Reed would be a great asset to have, like potentially top 20 rest of season, that kind of ceiling, hypothetically speaking. And I do think that he's someone that you can stash right now. I almost had him as an ad on 15 transactions earlier this week. And to be fair to Reed, who again, I think he's very talented, he has an outlier type of profile. He's been so efficient per route run to start his career. If there's someone who can kind of buck this trend, I think he'd be on the short list. But if we're strictly looking at this from a probability-driven lens, in order for Reed to be a consistent player across a large stretch, the Packers need to change up his role, period. Maybe they do that post-injury. I just wouldn't bet on that. And that lowers the type of ceiling that I was just talking about. But look, we know he's capable of having spiked weeks and generating big plays. Maybe it all comes together and he's just super efficient down the stretch while facing what my numbers say is the 3rd best wide receiver schedule rest of season. Again, you can add him, especially in deeper leagues. I'm just pointing out that he does have a cap ceiling in this offense because of the way they deploy him. And it's unfortunate because he's a really awesome player. This next question is from Blue Sky. It's from @ZombieToken. It says, which teams have your favorite rest of season schedules for each fantasy position? So with a question like this, I'm not going to give individual player takes. I'm just going to share what my numbers show right now. And this is all available on the Late Round Fantasy Football Patreon. Just go to lateround.com, click Patreon if you're interested. I even split up by playoff weeks if you're interested in that. But this is pre-Thursday Night Football adjusted fantasy points allowed schedules from weeks 11 through 17. None of these are going to be flawless schedules. Each player is bound to have a bad matchup or two. But here goes. At quarterback right now, the top 3, they look like Baltimore, Miami, and New England. And just to reiterate, this is not just the fantasy playoffs. This is rest of season. At running back, we've got New England again, and then a 3-way tie between the Browns, Packers, and Steelers. At wide receiver, Cincinnati's number 1, Miami's number 2, and then there are a few teams at number 3, Detroit, Green Bay, and Minnesota. And the reason there are ties here is because I'm looking at median opponent during this time frame. At tight end, it's Indianapolis, and then Baltimore, and then the New York Jets. So there you have it. You can see all of the details with these adjusted fantasy points allowed numbers on Patreon, like I said, which includes how many points above or below expectation each team allows. But that's where we're at rest of season. This next question is from Patreon. It's from Florian. It says, hi, JJ. Brock Purdy looks to have a chance to play this week. How bullish are you with him rest of season? So at the time of this recording, I don't know if he's in or out this week, but let's talk about Brock Purdy. After sitting down and thinking about this, I think Purdy is actually a pretty interesting buy right now for teams looking at the playoffs. We know he can work in this system. I mean, there's a reason he was like a low-end QB1, high-end QB2 in fantasy drafts this year. Ricky Pearsall's getting healthier. George Kittle is back. Juwan Jennings is starting to look more like his 2024 self. Christian McCaffrey's active. And maybe we even see Brandon Ayuk eventually. And then Kyle Shanahan this week, he said that when Brock Purdy is back, he won't have to change his mobility. He said, quote, I think if you go tell a guy to not be mobile and to stay out of situations, it's kind of hard to be successful. And that was really big for Purdy last year. He went from 1.7 points per game via rushing in 2023 to 4.2 points per game in 2024. It gave him a better floor, even with regression coming. And then you take all that and you layer on the schedule. In the fantasy football playoffs, Purdy, if he's back and ready to rock, he'll face the Titans, Colts, and Bears. The Titans and Bears, those games are in San Francisco. The Colts game is in Indianapolis, but that's a dome game. Honestly, guys, whether we see Purdy this weekend or not, it wouldn't surprise me if I'm talking about him as a buy candidate on next week's 15 Transactions show. The last question this week is from @TheCurLife. It says, what's the upside of RJ Harvey if J.K. Dobbins misses time? Do you see him having league-winning upside with Sean Payton's offense? How similar of a player is he to Alvin Kamara? So you'll hear a lot of RJ Harvey talk on this week's Perspectives episode, which drops later today. But I thought I could add some additional commentary right now, or give my specific take before you hear what's said on that episode. I liked Harvey as a prospect, but not quite as much as some others, because there were people out there who were serious truthers. They loved RJ Harvey. But he does check some of the boxes that I care about for fantasy purposes. He's a capable enough pass catcher, he's got enough size, and he's insanely explosive. Now, I will say this, I never really understood the Alvin Kamara comps. I talked about that a bit after he was drafted to Denver. As prospects, they were pretty different, at least in my opinion. Just analytically via the ZAP model, Alvin Kamara entered the league before turning 22 years old. RJ Harvey was past his 24th birthday. Alvin Kamara had 9 pounds on him, and he's a little bit taller. Harvey has that stockier build. And people forget this, but Kamara didn't have crazy speed with his 40. Harvey ran a 4.4 flat. Kamara was at a 4.56. Most importantly, from a production standpoint, Kamara had a breakout score of 92, which is amazing. It's great. That's based on age-adjusted receiving yards per team pass attempt. Harvey's was about 51. And then Kamara's best season in prorated reception share was almost 20%. Harvey's was 11%. According to my stuff, Kamara was the better prospect. We can say that in hindsight, sure, but I'm staring at the ZAP model right now, and Alvin Kamara has a ZAP score of about 93. Harvey was at 84, despite Harvey having slightly better draft capital. Alvin Kamara was an incredible pass-catching prospect. I don't think Harvey's that. Harvey's just a different type of player all around. And I don't think we'd be making this comparison if he wasn't playing for Sean Payton. Now, with that being said, I don't think he needs to be Alvin Kamara for us to feel bullish. Dobbins has been seeing running back rush shares of 83% and 81% over the last couple of games. I mean, on the season, his running back rush share per game rate is about 75%. He's seeing like 3/4 of the team's running back rushes. Now, I think we're going to see Jaleel McLaughlin now sprinkled in with some ground game stuff. And like I said in the Sleeper Show, you've got Tyler Bidet to do some of that 2-minute, some of that hurry-up stuff. He's going to keep stealing some routes. But I don't see why Harvey can't be like a 50 to 60% running back rush share player in this offense, which could yield like 13 to 15 carries on the ground per game. And then the problem with Dobbins this year was the pass catching stuff. But that's less of a problem for RJ Harvey. So on top of that work on the ground, maybe he could be like a 10 to 12% target share player. So let's just run through this real quick. Let's widen our parameters here to 45 to 65% running back rush shares and a 9 to 13% target share. We've had 25 of those types of outings from running backs this season. RJ Harvey actually got there in week 4. When you average out those players' PPR points in those 25 instances, you get 13.7 PPR points per game, which I think intuitively, that's not a horrible like median outcome outlook for RJ Harvey. And then you can kind of work off of that for the upside of more work, for him being really efficient, if those types of things really come together. The only downside is they get the Chiefs this week and then the Packers a little bit later in the season, with the Chiefs again coming on Christmas. And that just depends on how long J.K. Dobbins is going to be out for. But it doesn't seem like a short-term injury right now for J.K. Dobbins. And there are some good matchups in there too against the Commanders and Raiders after this Chiefs game. So yeah, look, I wouldn't expect like a full-blown bell cow type role. I don't think he's going to see that kind of production. But I think 14 PPR points per game is well within reach. And there's upside with that type of outlook too. That's it for today's show, though. Thanks to all of you for listening. If you get subscribed to the Late Round Fantasy Football Podcast, make sure you are by searching for it pretty much anywhere podcasts can be found. And don't forget to follow me on Twitter and on Blue Sky at Late Round QB. Later today, you get another episode of Late Round Perspectives. I'm excited for you guys to hear that one. And then also at 1 p.m. Eastern on the YouTube channel, that's youtube.com/@LateRoundFF, I'll be live with David Kitchen to do the Late Round Fantasy Football Show. If you can't watch that on YouTube, if you can't join us, it will drop in this podcast feed tomorrow morning. Thanks for listening, everyone. Good luck in Week 11. I'll catch you next week.
The weather outside is frightful, the fire is so delightful, and you're living your best holiday life in Old Navy Jingle Jammies. Because honestly, it's not the season without them. They're instant spirit wrapped in flannel. Get the whole family in matching sets for the photo, the cocoa, and the big morning. Old Navy has the classics like plaid and plenty of fun new options too, including exclusive Disney prints. Think Mickey and Friends, Stitch and Angel, even Star Wars jammies. Find Jingle Jammies and all your festive favorites now at OldNavy.com.
Wasabi is purpose-built to free your business from skyrocketing storage costs and fees from the big guys. Wasabi is the go-to provider for professional and collegiate sports teams around the world. Check out Wasabi's AI-enabled intelligent media storage, Wasabi Air, and the industry's only cloud storage service with triple protection against cyber criminals. Wasabi, driving innovation in data storage for up to 80% less than market competition. Try for free at wasabi.com. Wasabi Hot Cloud Storage, proud partner of iHeart Podcast Network.